Hello, YouTube viewers. Welcome to another edition of Jackson's Journal. My name is Matthew Jackson, and what I want to talk to you about today is I want to do a rebuttal video on a video that was produced by a guy that calls himself Big Joel. That's the name of his YouTube channel. This video came out on September 29th, 2020. The title of the video is called Anti-Abortion Propaganda. And basically, it was a movie criticizing, it was a video criticizing the movie Unplanned. Unplanned is the Abby Johnson story. For those of you who don't know who Abby Johnson is, she used to be an abortion mill director of a Planned Parenthood abortion mill in Bryan, College Station, Texas, somewhere around there, and she converted to pro-life and left the abortion industry. And then in the movie tells her story. So Joel thought that this movie about Abby Johnson and her story was anti-abortion propaganda. Of course, Joel is a left-wing liberal, so anything conservative or Christian he would think is propaganda because that's his worldview, as being a left-wing liberal. So understandable. The video that Big Joel did lasted about 30 to 31 minutes. It was broken up into 4 parts. The first part was the intro, which went 4 minutes, 10 seconds. The second part was called Part 1, Terms of the Conversation. That went 6 minutes, 50 seconds. Part 2 is the third part. I know it sounds weird, but yeah, it was intro, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. So that's how you get your 4 parts. But anyway, Part 2, the moral stakes of the conversation, that went 6 minutes, 40 seconds. Then the last part, entitled Part 3, the absence of the conversation, that went 12 minutes and 20 seconds. Anyway, 30 minutes total. Now, in today's video that I'm going to do in rebuttal to Big Joel, I'm just going to address Part 1 of his video, the first 4 minutes, 10 seconds, 2 issues in particular. Before I do that, please, if you like my videos, give me the thumbs up or give me the thumbs down if you're a pro-abortion and you don't like my videos. And please check out some of my other videos while you're on my channel. Please subscribe to my channel and also share. Also make comments. If you do not agree with what I'm saying in my videos, you're free to disagree. Just be nice, okay? There's no sense in getting ugly. So just tell me why you disagree and keep it on issues. Okay, now there are 2 basic things that Big Joel says, and here's the first thing he said. When he opened his video, the first thing that flew out of his mouth is, "Hey everybody, let's imagine a conversation between a pro-life Christian and me, a pro-choice genius." He actually said that. I'm quoting it verbatim, okay? He glossed himself as a pro-choice genius. Now, one thing about that phrase, if that phrase isn't an oxymoron and a contradiction in terms, I don't know what is, because pro-choice, the term, is a farce. It's a euphemism. It's a misnomer. Okay, they're not pro-choice. They're pro-abortion. Pro-choice is what pro-abortion people call themselves, so it doesn't sound quite as bad. The reason I have a problem with pro-choice is because the baby getting aborted does not figure into the choice. It's only the mother's choice, okay? Also, what about those mothers that don't want to get an abortion and they choose to keep the baby, but they're pressured by their family members or their boyfriend or significant other to have the abortion, okay? Where are the pro-aborts standing with the women who decide not to have an abortion and to keep the baby? So the pro-aborts are only pro-choice when the mother chooses to have the abortion. If they choose not to have the abortion, then they're upset. Yes. Now, so he talks about a conversation between a Christian pro-lifer and him, the pro-choice genius. So he actually fabricates a conversation. Now, at the end of the conversation, he actually admitted that the conversation is very caricaturish, and I would say it goes way, way, way beyond caricaturish, because the pro-life Christian represented in this fake, contrived conversation is not something let's just say, an educated pro-lifer, someone who's been in the pro-life movement a while, protesting abortion for a while, who's done their homework and is educated on how to articulate and defend the pro-life position. This is not something a pro-life Christian would say. This would be something maybe a pro-life Christian who hasn't been a pro-life Christian very long, maybe a nominal pro-life Christian. But let me go ahead and run the conversation. I'm going to do the entire conversation. Then I'll go back line by line and do my critique. So here is the pro-life Christian making his argument. Quote, human personhood with all the meaning and sanctity that holds begins at conception. The moment the sperm meets the egg, when the mother aborts her pregnancy, it's wrong, murderous. Then Mr. Pro-choice genius responds by saying, quote, that argument doesn't hold up to scrutiny. What is it about a zygote that makes it a person with human rights? It doesn't feel pain, it doesn't make decisions or plans. Excuse me while I flip the pages. It doesn't love, it doesn't have any desires, including the desire to live, it doesn't think. It has none of the characteristics that we normally associate with personhood. End of quote. Then the supposed pro-life Christian responds by saying, okay, let's move the goalpost a tiny bit. Maybe the zygote isn't a full-fledged person yet, but they certainly have the potential to be one, and that potential should be preserved. End of quote. Our pro-choice genius responds, why are we placing this potential line here? Why aren't you mad that I am not having sex? No. Why aren't you mad that I'm not always having sex? Why aren't you mourning when women have periods? Yes, so this is the questions from a pro-choice genius. I'm not making this up. There's just no actual reason we're using the zygote to delineate between the potential for personhood and the lack thereof. End of quote. Then the pro-life Christian responds, the reason we should make a line here is because conception is when the human soul comes into existence. The pro-choice genius responds, quote, that's a faith-based argument. And if you want our society to restrict access to abortions on that basis, what you're really doing is forcing people to hold to your religious values. And I don't want to live in a Christian theocracy. End of quote. Then the pro-choice and pro-life Christian responds, why not? Jesus died for your sins. End of quote. So that's the conversation. Now, for those of you who are pro-life and have been arguing and defending the pro-life position for quite some time, you would see automatically that there's a lot of flaws in Mr. Pro-choice genius's logic here. And first of all, let me just say this. Yeah, the first opening statement by the pro-life Christian, human personhood with all its meaning and sanctity holds begins at conception. That I agree. When the moment the sperm meets the egg, that's it. And of course, you don't abort a pregnancy, you abort the child, the product, the baby, the zygote, the blastocyst, the embryo, fetus. That gets aborted. Well, actually, you can't abort the zygote, but I'll get to that later. But you don't technically abort a pregnancy. Now, the first question asked by Mr. Pro-Choice Genius is, what is it about a zygote that makes it a person with human rights? Good question, and I'm going to answer that right now. But let me take a swig of water here. Here's why life begins at conception. When the sperm and the egg meet, that is a person. That zygote is a person. And the reason it's a person, it's a living, it's a life, is because it has its own distinct genetic DNA. It has its own genetic code that's separate from the mother's. Now, if the mother was to grow a tumor somewhere on her body, that tumor would have the same DNA that the host has, that the mother has, okay, that the woman has. In the case of a pregnancy is not a tumor. A pregnancy is its own independent entity with its own independent DNA, half of which came from the mother, the other half came from the father. Now, yeah, at that point, a zygote does not feel pain, does not make decisions or plans, does not love, have any desires to live, doesn't think. Okay, well, for the most part, a newborn baby doesn't have many of these. Now, a newborn can feel pain, of course, but it doesn't make decisions or plan. It doesn't love. The only desire a newborn baby has is to eat. All right, other than that, you can't interact with the child until several weeks later. So, but yeah, the zygote is still a human life, even though it does not possess all the physical features that us developed human beings have. But the genetic code has been established at the point of conception. The person's height, body type, blood type, skin complexion, hair color, eye color, gender, male or female, all that is decided at the moment of conception. The genetic code for all that to develop resides inside the zygote as it's dividing up into cells. So even though those physical features have not manifested itself at this point in time, at the zygote stage, the genetic code, the blueprints are there, and the materials to make that human being with all those physical characteristics reside in that zygote. It would be no different than if you were to build a house. You have the blueprints to your house, and then you compile all the building materials required to build the house. The cement, the bricks, the drywall, the wood, the plumbing, the electrical, the fixtures, the sinks, lights, all that. And you put it in one pile and you have your blueprints, okay? Now that pile of materials and the blueprint may not be a fully realized house, but there's the house, okay? The house exists, it's just a matter of development from that point. And that's the point. Now, one thing about the word zygote, and I don't know if Mr. Pro-Choice Genius really understands what a zygote is. I kind of wonder because of the way he used the term zygote. He used the term 4 times in the introductory part of his video. A zygote is a fertilized egg that is in the fallopian tube of the mother. That lasts from anywhere from 3 to 5 days. Once that fertilized egg leaves the fallopian tube and attaches itself to the wall and the lining of the uterus, it is no longer a zygote at that point. It is a blastocyst. Okay? So, and it's a blastocyst for about 6 days, a week. Then after that, it becomes an embryo for about 6 weeks. Then after that, somewhere in the ninth week, that embryo converts to a fetus. Okay. So the way Mr. Pro-Choice Genius used the word zygote, you would think it's zygote then fetus, and there's no intermediate stages, okay? You can't abort a zygote, okay? Well, unless you take the morning after pill, maybe, but what I'm saying is most women, when they get pregnant, they don't know that they're pregnant until about 2 weeks after conception. Well, by that time, it's no longer a zygote or a blastocyst. It's probably an embryo, or, usually most abortions happen in the 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th weeks when it's already a fetus. So enough said about that. Let me move on. Now, when he said to the pro-life, the pro-lifer in his contrived conversation said, okay, let's move the goalpost a tiny bit. Okay, a true pro-lifer who really understands the pro-life position is not going to move the goalpost one iota. That zygote is every bit as much of a human being as us developed humans. So we're not moving the goalpost. A life is a life. It's not a potential life. A zygote is not a potential life. It is a life. It is a human being. Now, getting back to the Mr. Pro-Choice Genius here, he says, why aren't you mad that I'm not always having sex? That question has a double negative. I don't understand the double negative in the question. Why aren't you mad that I'm not always having sex? And the next question is, why aren't you mourning when women have periods? Well, why would we mourn when women have periods? Discharging an unfertilized egg is not a loss of human life. Okay, it's not an unfertilized egg, just like a sperm, is not a human life. There's no potential reason we're using the zygote to delineate between the potential personhood and the lack thereof. Now, the pro-lifer said the reason we should make a line here is because conception is when the human soul comes into existence. Now, that is a pro-life position. We do get that from Jeremiah 1:5, where it says, I knew you before you were in your mother's womb. So that's where we do. And that is a faith-based argument. I'll give you that. But here's the deal, though. The pro-aborts, their arguments are faith-based as well. Listen, the pro-life position is life begins at conception, okay? If the pro-aborts are going to say, if they're going to contend that life does not begin at conception, then it behooves them to establish when life does begin, okay? Does it begin when the baby is born? Does it begin in the 3rd trimester? Does it begin in the 2nd trimester? And what's really weird is I've been in the pro-life movement and doing this for about 30 years now, and I've debated many pro-aborts. And these pro-aborts will say pro-choice and women's right to choose. They say this all the time. It's a cliche, all right? My rebuttal to that is, okay, at what point do you think a mother's right to choose should expire? When should she lose her right to choose to have the abortion? And depending on which pro-abortion person you talk to, you can get a wide range of answers. I've had pro-aborts tell me, well, abortion should be legal for the first trimester only, but second and third trimester, they lose the right to choose. Okay, well, what value system do they have that determines that abortion is wrong after the first trimester, but not during the first trimester? Some will say, well, the first two trimesters, but that third trimester, no way. And then I've met pro-aborts that said that abortion should be legal straight up to birth. So even if the woman's water breaks and she's minutes away from having an abortion, she could just choose to have an abortion. And they would be perfectly okay with doing that. With a fully developed fetus ready to be born, they're okay with having an abortion. And then I've talked to pro-aborts that said the mother should have the right to have her newborn baby killed. So the line among the pro-abortion community is all over the place. So wherever you put that line, that's based on a moral, religious value. Now, one thing Mr. Pro-Choice Genius said is, that's a faith-based argument, and if you want our society to restrict access to abortions on that basis, what you're really doing is forcing people to hold to your religious values. Well, Planned Parenthood is funded with federal tax dollars. Federal tax dollars go to Planned Parenthood. All right? I'm a taxpayer. So if you're using my tax dollars to go to Planned Parenthood, you are forcing pro-life people to hold to pro-abortion religious values. That sword cuts both ways. And then he says, I don't want to live in a Christian theocracy. Well, you won't have to worry, Mr. Pro-Choice Genius, you're not going to have to worry about living in a Christian theocracy because the United States is a constitutional republic. The unborn people were protected by law before 1973. We weren't living in a Christian theocracy before Roe v. Wade. So I don't think you're going to have to worry about living in a Christian theocracy just because we have laws that protect unborn children. Now, and then of course the pro-life says, why not? Jesus died for your sins. I won't even go there. That's just a throwaway line. But there you go. So there's the contrived conversation that Mr. Pro-Choice Genius made up and how flawed it is. Now, Mr. Pro-Choice Genius, can I make a suggestion? There's a movie called Gosnell. I don't know if you know who Kermit Gosnell is, but he's an abortionist, or was actually. He ran an abortion mill in Philadelphia, in the state of Pennsylvania. He did late-term abortions beyond the 24-week period. In Pennsylvania, it is illegal to perform an abortion on a fetus that's more than 24 weeks old. And he did. And there were some that were born alive, and he killed the baby when it was born alive by taking a pair of scissors and snipping the spinal column in the back of its neck. There are women who actually died in his abortion mill. You pro-aborts are the first to say, oh, safe abortions. Well, first of all, safe abortion is a contradiction in terms because there's no such thing as a safe abortion. When a pro-abortion person says safe abortion, they mean safe for the mother. They don't mean safe for the baby. Anyway, the movie Gosnell did a documentary basically telling the story of this abortionist and how he killed the babies and how the conditions were unsanitary. unsafe. And I would like Mr. Pro-choice genius to watch that movie and come and do a video on his channel. And I would like to hear him say that that movie was propaganda. That would be very interesting. The movie came out, oh, good grief. It came out on October 12th, 2018. So that's about almost 4 years old. But yeah, Mr. Pro-choice genius, watch that movie. Give us a review. All right. Thank you for watching. And like I said, please feel free to watch some of my other videos. Like, share, subscribe. You know the drill. Thank you, and God bless.